It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind you find in nature, but a dead, heavy stillness that felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. The streets outside my window were empty. No cars, no footsteps, no laughter, just the distant echo of an ambulance siren that never seemed to fade away. For days, I had been trapped inside my apartment, staring at the same four walls while the news screamed about death counts and isolation. But on one particular night, something else began. A sound that didn't belong. A faint knock on my door at exactly 3:07 a.m. When I opened it, there was no one there. Only a single N95 mask lying on the floor, with my name written on it in black ink. That night, everything changed. I had been living alone since the lockdown began. My city, once alive with constant noise, had turned into a ghost town. The air outside carried the smell of disinfectant and rain, and the constant fear of infection. No one visited, no one dared to. But after that first knock, the feeling of being alone slowly turned into something else, something darker. I started hearing muffled coughing sounds in the hallway, even though every apartment was supposed to be empty. When I asked the landlord, he said no one had lived in that section of the building since February. One of the tenants had died of COVID there, and the unit was sealed. Yet every night at the same time, I'd hear footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps, stopping right outside my door. The next morning, sunlight bled through my curtains like pale ribbons, but the air inside my apartment still felt thick, unnatural. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building, every shift of wind outside the window made my skin crawl. That mask, the one with my name scrawled on it, still lay on the kitchen counter. I hadn't thrown it away, though every instinct in me screamed that I should. I picked it up once, thinking maybe someone was playing a cruel joke. But when I turned it over, I noticed something else. A faint brown stain on the inside. Not quite red, but not clean either, like dried blood. I dropped it instantly. I called my landlord again. He sounded tired, almost frightened when I mentioned the noise and the mask. "Look, sir," he said quietly. "That part of the building is locked. It's been locked for weeks. You're the only tenant on that floor who still hasn't moved out." That made me pause. "What do you mean, moved out?" "Everyone left. After what happened in apartment 7C, they couldn't take it. The guy who lived there, Thomas, he died alone. Took the cops 3 days to find him. They say he was still wearing his hospital wristband." The line went silent for a moment, then he added, "Don't go near that door. I mean it." I wanted to believe him, wanted to dismiss everything as paranoia or stress. But that same night, at 3:07 a.m., I heard it again. The coughing. Only this time, it was closer, louder, right outside my door. I turned off the lights, my heartbeat crashing in my chest. From the peephole, I saw only darkness at first, but then movement, a flicker, a shadow standing just at the end of the hallway. Wearing a white hospital gown, head tilted slightly, like it was listening. I stepped back from the door, breath frozen. When I dared to look again, it was gone. But something else was there. Another mask. This one wasn't new. It looked used, crumpled, dirty. And beneath it, taped to the floor, was a folded note. I stared at that note for what felt like an eternity before finally bending down to pick it up. It was a piece of paper torn from a medical form, faintly smudged with fingerprints. Scrawled across it in hurried handwriting were 3 words. "Don't let it in." No explanation, no signature, just that warning. For the rest of the night I sat awake, staring at the door, waiting for something, anything to happen. Nothing did, until the morning. When I went out to check the hallway, I saw that the door to apartment 7C, the one that was supposed to be sealed, was slightly open. Not wide, not enough to see inside, just a few inches, as if inviting me to look. I knew I shouldn't. But fear has a strange way of turning into curiosity. So I stepped closer. The air around that door was colder, like walking into a freezer. I could smell disinfectant, rot, and something metallic. I called out softly, "Thomas?" No answer, just the soft, rhythmic sound of dripping water. The hallway light flickered, and for one split second I saw something through the crack. A figure lying on the floor inside, pale and motionless, surrounded by scattered medical papers. But when the light steadied, it was gone. The floor inside was empty. That's when I noticed the door had moved slightly more open. Inside apartment 7C, I told myself I was doing it to prove nothing was there, to end the nightmares. But when I stepped inside, everything in me knew I had made a mistake. The apartment was silent, thick with dust and stale air. Furniture covered in white sheets, an overturned chair, and in the corner, a small table with an oxygen tank still attached to a deflated mask. The walls were covered in something strange, notes, taped pages from a journal, and hospital reports, all written by hand, all saying the same line over and over again. "It comes through breath." I backed away slowly, my throat tightening. That's when I heard a faint whisper behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, but no one was there. Just the slow sound of breathing coming from the bedroom. The door creaked open on its own. There was a hospital bed in the center of the room, sheets stained yellow and brown. And on the pillow, another mask. But this one wasn't empty. Inside the mask, pressed deep into the fabric, was the shape of a human face. Not printed, not drawn, but burned in, like someone had worn it for too long, long after they should have stopped breathing. I stumbled backward, my hand covering my mouth. That's when I saw movement under the bed. A hand. Thin, bony, trembling, reaching out slowly toward me. I ran. I slammed the door behind me and didn't stop until I was back in my own apartment, locking every bolt, sealing every window. But when I turned around, the mask from my counter at the first one was gone. For the next few days, I couldn't think straight. The image of that hand reaching from under the bed haunted me, not just when I was awake, but when I tried to sleep. I kept hearing faint, shallow breathing in my room, like someone was trying to mimic the sound of my own lungs. Every night, I'd wake up at exactly 3:07 a.m. Every night, I'd see the same thing. That faint shadow standing at the end of the hallway, not moving, not speaking, just breathing. At first, I thought maybe it was stress. After all, the whole world was losing its mind in April 2020. People were dying in hospitals, locked away from their families. No funerals, no goodbyes. The news said the virus spreads through air, through breath. But what if it wasn't just the virus that was spreading? What if something else was traveling with it, something we couldn't see? On the 5th day after entering apartment 7C, I started coughing. A dry, deep cough that burned my chest. I checked my temperature, 99.8 degrees, then 100.1 degrees. Panic clawed through me. I tried to call the health department hotline, but all I got was a recorded message. "Due to high call volume, please remain on the line." No one ever picked up. I locked myself inside my apartment, like everyone else in the city. I disinfected everything. I wore gloves to touch the doorknob, but none of that stopped the smell. It wasn't coming from the hallway anymore. It was coming from inside my room. That metallic, rotten odor that clings to old hospitals and blood-stained gloves. I tore my place apart, looking for where it came from. That's when I found the mask. It was lying under my bed. The same one that had vanished days ago, the one with my name written on it. Only now the letters were darker, smeared, almost wet. I set up a small quarantine room in my apartment, just my bedroom, sealed with towels under the door, windows closed. I thought if I kept myself isolated, whatever this was would stop. But the coughing grew worse. I started to feel pressure in my chest, like someone sitting on me while I slept. And then came the voice. faint at first, like a breath against my ear. "You let me in." I froze. The sound came from behind me, from the corner of the room where the air looked darker, thicker somehow. I turned, whispering, "Who's there?" Nothing, just the sound of a slow inhale and an even slower exhale. I switched on my flashlight. For a second, I saw it. The same hospital gown I'd seen in the hallway, now standing just inches away. Its head tilted toward me, mask still on its face, fogging with every breath. Then the flashlight flickered out. When it came back on, I was alone. After that night, I set up my phone to record while I slept. The next morning, I played the video. For the first few hours, there was nothing, just me tossing, coughing, breathing. Then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., the screen went static. The phone camera glitched for about 20 seconds, then the image cleared. And that's when I saw it. A figure standing beside my bed, still, breathing, watching. Its hand reached toward my face, stopped, and then slowly pulled something from my mouth. Something thin and black like smoke or a thread. I dropped my phone. I couldn't finish watching. A week later, another note appeared under my door. This one written in the same jagged handwriting as before. "It doesn't kill you. It copies you." The words burned in my mind all day. What did that mean? Was this some kind of hallucination? A breakdown from isolation? That night, I took another look at the papers I'd found in apartment 7C. I noticed one of them had an address scribbled at the bottom. The name of a clinic on the other side of town. St. Vincent Isolation Ward. I didn't know why, but something inside me said, "Go there." The city was silent as I drove through it the next morning. Police checkpoints, closed stores, bodies covered in white sheets outside hospitals. It felt like the end of the world. When I reached the clinic, it looked abandoned. Windows broken, front door chained shut. But there was a small gap in the side entrance. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of bleach and decay. Every hallway was littered with masks, gloves, and empty stretchers. And then, halfway down one of the corridors, I saw something that froze me in place. A wall covered with photographs, dozens of them, all taken in this same building, each one showing a different patient lying in bed, each patient wearing the same mask. And on the bottom corner of one photo, my name. I forced myself to check the control room nearby. The monitors were old, still faintly flickering. I played the last recorded footage, dated April 7th, 2020, the night before I found the first mask. The screen showed apartment 7C, Thomas, the tenant, coughing violently in bed, alone. He stood up, staggering toward the camera, ripping off his mask. Then, something moved behind him. A shadowy figure with no clear shape, just black air twisting like smoke, reaching for him. When it touched his back, Thomas collapsed. The mask fell from his hand and slid across the floor, toward the door. The last frame showed that mask lying there, perfectly still. And on it, the name written in fresh ink, mine. I ran out of the clinic, coughing again, chest tight, breath shallow. The world outside looked gray, blurred. I couldn't tell if it was the virus or the thing I had brought with me. But every mirror I passed on my way home reflected something wrong. My face, yes, but behind it, a faint outline of another face, wearing a mask. When I came back from the clinic, I barely recognized my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were sunken, my skin pale and dry like I hadn't slept in days, though I couldn't remember when I last truly did. The coughing had stopped, but something worse had replaced it, a constant low whisper that followed me from room to room. At first, I thought it was the sound of the building's old pipes, that groaning hum of trapped air that comes through the vents. But then the whispers began forming words. "You're breathing it wrong." The first time I heard that, I froze mid-step. The voice didn't echo, It was inside my head, and yet somehow, it wasn't mine. That night, I brushed my teeth with trembling hands. I could feel the weight of someone standing behind me again. That faint static feeling in the air, like a charged silence before a storm. I looked up slowly into the mirror, and there it was. Not directly behind me, but inside the reflection. A version of me, standing perfectly still, no blinking, no breathing, just watching. I turned around instantly, nothing there. But when I looked back at the mirror, my reflection smiled. I didn't. It was the smallest movement, lips curling slightly, eyes narrowing, but I swear on my life I wasn't moving. And then, as I stumbled back, my reflection leaned forward and whispered. The glass didn't move, but the sound came clear as day. You let me in. The same words I'd heard that night in the quarantine room. I ran from the bathroom, slammed the door, and covered the mirror with a towel. But even through the walls, I could hear faint breathing. I tried to call someone, anyone, old friends, family, the landlord, but the calls never connected. Every time I'd just hear static, and sometimes, beneath that static, my own voice repeating, "Don't let it in." My phone began to ring randomly throughout the day, even when it wasn't charging or connected to a network. Unknown number. Always the same. When I picked up, I'd hear shallow breathing, followed by coughing. Then the line would go dead. I thought about leaving the city, but where would I go? There were curfews, blockades, soldiers on every street. And besides, deep down, I knew I wasn't supposed to leave. Whatever this thing was, it had already followed me inside. And the mask appears again. On April 19th, I woke up to find the mask back on my kitchen table. The same one, still damp, still with my name. But this time, something new was written on the other side. Put it on. I stared at it for hours. I didn't want to touch it, didn't even want to breathe near it. But by evening, as the sun went down and the apartment darkened, I started to feel dizzy, like the air itself was thinning. A strange instinct, not mine, told me to do it, to wear it, so I did. The moment the fabric touched my face, the room went silent, utterly silent, not even my heartbeat. Then the whispering returned. Not outside this time, but inside the mask, echoing directly against my skin. Voices layered over each other, hundreds of them, murmuring in unison. You breathe, we live. You breathe, we remember. I tore the mask off, gasping, throwing it across the room. It landed near the window, and in the reflection of the glass, for just a split second, I saw someone else wearing it. Someone who looked like me. The next morning, I woke to find a glass of water on my bedside table. I hadn't put it there. And beside it, on a piece of torn paper, was a note written in my own handwriting. You didn't drink last night. My stomach turned cold. I hadn't written that. I was sure of it. But there it was, the same ink, same style, like a reminder from someone who knew my every move. All day I caught glimpses of movement in the corner of my eyes, a figure pacing when I paced, sitting when I sat. Every reflection, the TV screen, the window, even the dark glass of my phone, seemed delayed, just a fraction of a second slower, as if my reflection was thinking about whether or not to follow. That night, I recorded myself again while sleeping. When I checked the footage in the morning, the bed was empty, but the camera showed something sitting in the chair across from it. Me, sitting perfectly still, watching myself sleep, until 3:07 a.m. Then it stood, leaned over my body and whispered, "We can't all stay." I started losing track of time. My clock stopped at 3:07, every single one. The power would flicker, lights dimming in slow rhythm with my own breath. And sometimes the air felt shared, like someone else was inhaling with me, exhaling just after. The next time I looked in the mirror, the towel had fallen. I didn't see my apartment behind me. I saw 7C. That same hospital bed. That same shadow moving behind the curtain. Then the reflection leaned forward and whispered, "You were supposed to die here too." That morning, the TV turned on by itself. The news anchor was speaking in a shaky voice about unidentified respiratory cases and mutations that caused patients to behave violently before death. Then the feed glitched. The anchor froze, then looked directly at the camera and said my name. "He's still breathing." Static filled the screen. I unplugged the TV, but her voice continued echoing from the dead speakers. "He's still breathing, but not for long." That night the coughing returned, deeper, harsher. I vomited blood into the sink. The moment the blood hit the porcelain, it began to move on its own, forming a shape, 2 eye sockets and a mouth, the outline of the mask. I screamed until my throat tore raw. At dawn, I woke up in my bed with the sun streaming through the blinds. Everything looked calm. The mask was gone. The whispers had stopped. For the first time in weeks, I felt normal, alive, but when I walked past the mirror, I noticed something off. The reflection moved perfectly on except for one small detail. It didn't blink. And when I leaned closer, it smiled again. Slow, deliberate. Then it whispered, "Your breath is mine now." The reflection lifted its hand, and so did I, but half a second late. And in that delay, in that sliver of time, I realized I wasn't the one controlling it anymore. That night I recorded another video. I sat in front of the camera looking into my own eyes and said, "If anyone finds this, I think I'm being replaced." When I played it back the next morning, my lips were still moving, but the voice that came out wasn't mine. When I woke up the next morning, everything was quiet again. Too quiet. No sirens, no footsteps from the street below, not even the low hum of the refrigerator that had always comforted me in its consistency. It was the silence that got to me first. Not the kind that calms, but the kind that feels watchful. The mask was gone. The notes were gone. Even the towel I'd thrown over the mirror had vanished. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it in the air, the heaviness, that quiet second breath overlapping mine. I decided to step outside. For the first time in weeks, I pulled on gloves, grabbed my sanitizer, and opened the front door. The hallway lights flickered as they always did, but the rest of the building felt different. Every door was open, every apartment empty. Dust floated in the air like fog. Abandoned shoes lined the corridor, as if their owners had stepped out of them and dissolved into thin air. At the end of the hall, the door to 7C was gone. Not open, gone. Just a smooth wall, no hinges, no frame. When I reached the ground floor, I expected chaos outside, sirens, masked faces, patrols, but the street was deserted. Every car stood frozen in place. Every window was dark, and yet there were figures moving in the distance. They walked slowly, mechanically, all wearing masks, identical masks. Their movements synchronized, heads turning in unison like puppets sharing a single string. When they passed beneath a streetlight, I saw their faces more clearly. They weren't faces at all. Just stretched skin molded around the mask, like the mask had grown into them. When I went back inside, the TV was on again. No power, no signal, just the same channel repeating one message over and over in a calm, robotic voice. Do not remove your mask. Do not resist the breath. The camera cut to footage of hospital wards, rows of patients lying still, breathing in unison. Nurses stood around them, motionless, all wearing the same expressionless mask. Then, for half a second, the feed glitched, and I saw myself on a hospital bed, eyes open. My phone rang, unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" There was breathing on the other end, that slow, shallow inhale I'd grown to recognize. Then a voice identical to mine whispered, "You shouldn't have gone outside." My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" I shouted. The voice laughed softly. "You already know. I told you not to let it in." Then the call ended. I stared at the phone, realizing that the last incoming call was logged yesterday morning. The timestamp read 3:07 a.m. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor by the window, watching those figures outside. They weren't wandering aimlessly anymore. They were standing still, facing upward toward my apartment, dozens of them. Just standing there, and one by one they began to remove their masks. I expected to see faces, maybe twisted or decayed. But there was nothing. Just hollow, gaping holes where their mouths and noses should have been, black as burnt paper. Then, from every hollow mouth, the same sound rose, a slow, collective whisper. "We remember." The windows began to fog from the inside. I pressed my hand against the glass. The fog on the other side pressed back. At 3:07 a.m., the doorknob began to turn. Slowly, silently. My phone started recording on its own. The screen flickered, showing the same words as before. "It doesn't kill you. It copies you." The door opened an inch, then another, and there I was, standing in the doorway. Same clothes, same face. But its eyes were completely white. It stepped inside, breathing heavily through the mask it wore. Then it took the mask off, and I saw my own mouth move as it whispered, "You stopped breathing hours ago." I stumbled backward, tripping over the chair, gasping for air that felt thinner by the second. The lights flickered out. In the darkness, I heard 1,000 tiny breaths, all overlapping, echoing through the vents. I could feel them brushing against my skin. Invisible fingers of air, pulsing in rhythm. The thing that looked like me walked closer. It knelt beside me, tilting its head, studying my face. Then it leaned close, pressing its forehead to mine. The air between us turned warm, alive, vibrating. And for one terrifying second, I wasn't sure which of us was breathing. The next thing I remember is waking up on the floor, sunlight pouring through the blinds, my phone still recording, battery almost dead. I watched the footage. In the video, I wasn't moving, but my double was. It walked around the room, cleaning, making coffee, opening windows, living like me. Then it turned toward the camera, smiled, and said, "We're safe now. Everyone's safe. We remember how to breathe." Then it sat down and stared directly into the lens for 7 straight minutes, not blinking once. When the recording ended, I noticed something strange. The reflection on the TV screen. It wasn't the same as the one in the video. The person moving in the reflection was still me, but the one holding the phone wasn't. That morning, the government lifted the restrictions. The news anchors smiled through their masks, assuring everyone that the virus has been contained. But when the cameras cut to street footage, I saw the truth. Every single person looked the same. Same walk, same rhythm, same white eyes behind identical masks. And as the broadcast ended, all the people on screen turned their heads toward the camera, toward me, and whispered in one voice, "You're the only one left." The power went out. The city outside fell silent again. And in the darkness, I heard that familiar sound. A soft knock at my door, 3 times. And then a whisper, "We need your breath." When the 5th night came, the city stopped pretending to be alive. The news said temporary containment. But the way the sirens echoed, slow, mechanical, and synchronized, felt like something much worse than quarantine. From my apartment window, I could see soldiers in hazmat suits walking block to block, spraying the streets with silver mist that shimmered under the floodlights. The mist didn't rise, it breathed. By morning, my phone lost all service. Only an emergency broadcast remained: stay indoors. Do not breathe the air unfiltered. I wrapped a wet cloth around my face and stepped into the hallway. The air stung like cold metal. Every apartment door had red tape sealing it shut, yet I heard whispering, faint and collective, like dozens of voices speaking the same words from different rooms. At the lobby, I found two soldiers arguing beside a supply crate. One of them was trembling, his suit fogged on the inside. "It's not airborne," he said, voice cracking. "It's alive. It follows sound." Before I could move, both soldiers turned toward the exit, and the entire glass wall pulsed inward, as if something outside had exhaled. The mist slipped through the cracks. Their visors went black. They froze mid-motion. I ran. Outside, the sun looked pale, like a dead bulb behind the clouds. I ran toward downtown, through alleys littered with abandoned masks. The shadows on the walls didn't match the light. They moved slower, thicker, almost liquid. When I stopped, they kept moving. At a bus stop, I found a man crouched and shaking. "They're sinking," he whispered. "Every breath connects. Every heartbeat joins the next." He lifted his sleeve. Veins under his skin glowed faintly red, pulsing with a rhythm that wasn't human. He smiled too wide, inhaled once, and his chest didn't fall again. The body stayed upright, gently swaying with the wind. I left him there, whispering inhaled words that weren't English anymore. That night, I reached the city bridge. Helicopters circled above but never descended. Below the bridge, the river moved backward, carrying debris and faces. People half submerged, eyes open, mouths bubbling in unison. I shouted for help. My voice echoed back, not from the water but from every direction, perfectly synchronized, repeating my words a half-second late. "Help! Help! Help!" Something crawled up from the water, thin and colorless, leaving footprints that steamed. I bolted toward the other end of the bridge, but soldiers blocked it, motionless, rifles aimed downward. When I got closer, I realized their chests rose and fell together. They weren't guarding anything. They were breathing the same breath. I found a manhole left open near the industrial sector and climbed down. The tunnel smelled like rust and medicine. My flashlight caught something wet on the walls, fibers like veins, spreading across concrete, glowing faintly. They contracted when my light hit them. Further in, I heard machines humming, a deep rhythmic tone. Then a sign, CDC, Field Lab 04. Inside, metal tables were overturned. A recording played on loop. Specimen 17 has demonstrated respiratory integration with host. Spread exceeds containment parameters. A glass tank stood in the corner, shattered from the inside. The floor was covered in translucent film, thin as skin. My boot sank slightly. Beneath it, something twitched. At the end of the tunnel stood a chamber glowing red. Inside, a massive structure, part flesh, part machinery, beat like a heart. Cables pierced its sides, connecting to respirators. Each pump released a hiss into the ventilation pipes. That's when I understood. The disinfectant mist wasn't cleaning the air. It was breathing for the city. Faces pressed against the transparent wall of the chamber, frozen expressions, still alive, merged into the organism. One of them looked like my upstairs neighbor from Part 3. Their eyes followed me as the heart pulsed faster, reacting to my presence. A voice echoed through the intercom, calm, scientific. Containment breached, synchronization level 99%. I ran. Alarms screamed. The tunnel convulsed, concrete cracking as something massive inhaled beneath it. The last thing I saw before blacking out was the mist surging upward through the vents toward the city. I woke up in a small radio station, power flickering. The emergency broadcast system sign blinked on an old monitor. Every channel played the same sound, a slow inhale, then an exhale. I turned down the volume, but the sound continued, coming from the walls themselves. On the desk lay a logbook, April 2020. Subject integration complete. Host awareness persists. My handwriting. I dropped the book and backed away, and backed. The microphone turned on by itself, red light glowing. A distorted version of my own voice began speaking through the speaker. If you're hearing this, you're already breathing with us. Days blurred. Food ran out. I found a working phone in the station. It rang at 3:33 a.m. every night. When I finally answered, there was breathing on the line. Slow, steady, in rhythm with mine. Then a whisper. You left the heart unfinished. Static hissed, and the line went dead. The next morning, I found wet footprints leading from the phone to the exit door. I followed the footprints into a maintenance corridor. A door at the end was chained shut, red light bleeding through the cracks. I cut the chain with a metal bar. Inside, a dozen people stood in a circle, faces covered by gauze masks, bodies swaying gently. They weren't breathing. The air around them was pulsing softly, lifting dust with each invisible exhale. In the center lay a ventilator connected to nothing, still rhythmically pumping. Every hiss matched my heartbeat. In the control room nearby, an old mirror hung crooked on the wall. I caught my reflection and froze. My chest wasn't rising or falling. The reflection, however, was breathing. It smiled slightly, fogging the glass. When I blinked, it didn't. A drop of condensation slid down the mirror's surface, forming words. Welcome back. I ran outside into what remained of the quarantine facility. Body bags lined the hallway, some twitching faintly. On a nearby monitor, a label read, Patient 0, April 2020. Status, active. The file photo was mine. Same clothes, same eyes. Date taken, yesterday. I realized then, maybe I never escaped the tunnels. Maybe all of this was the infection's dream, and I was just the body it borrowed to remember being human. I smashed the monitor, but every screen in the hallway flickered on. CCTV feeds showed the entire city breathing, buildings expanding, streets contracting like lungs. One camera pointed directly at me from above. I looked up, nothing there. Yet on screen, I saw my head tilt slowly, independently of me. Then my reflection on the black glass smiled again. Further down the hall, candlelight flickered through the broken doors of a ward. Inside, people in hazmat suits knelt around a circle of respirators humming together. They weren't praying, they were synchronizing. Each time the respirators hissed, their bodies moved slightly closer, their masks pulsing with crimson light. They looked up at me, perfectly in unison, and whispered, "Breathe." I ran to the roof. The city below was silent, except for the rhythmic hum rising from every direction. A single clock tower stood in the distance, frozen at 3:33 a.m. As I watched, the minute hand jerked backward, then forward again, matching the pulse of the red mist now spreading from the hospital district. My phone vibrated. A new notification from CDC app live feed. When I opened it, the camera switched on automatically, showing me on screen, but behind me stood hundreds of blurred figures, breathing in perfect time. The next inhale wasn't air. It was them. Every breath filled me with whispers, with memories that weren't mine. I fell to my knees, coughing up a thick mist. Faces formed in it, merging and dissolving again. The sky above the city turned deep red, like blood seen through water. Streetlights blinked out one by one. Somewhere below, the heart kept beating, steady, patient, endless. I remembered the voice from the tunnels. Containment breached. Now I understood the real meaning. It wasn't the virus escaping into us, it was us escaping into it. They found my camera near the bridge. Battery dead, lens cracked. Authorities claimed the footage was corrupted. But in the static, if you listen closely, you can still hear it. Not words, not screaming, just breathing. Slow, unified, eternal.